February 26, 2026. 25 days since Nancy Guthrie walked through her own front door for the last time, and tonight, the investigation is no longer the same case it was last week. What law enforcement has just revealed does not add up to the story we were told at the beginning. And when the evidence stops adding up, that is exactly when the truth starts to surface. Welcome. This is Crime Blackline Archive. The cases that deserve to be remembered. Before we go any further, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Every week we break down real investigations with the forensic detail they deserve. If you are following the Nancy Guthrie case, you need to be here for what comes next. Here is what changed everything. For weeks, law enforcement focused on what the Nest camera captured outside the front door: blood droplets on the porch, a figure moving in the dark, a vehicle disappearing into the Tucson night. That was the frame. That was the story. But investigators never told us what was happening on the other side of that door. Until now. Blood was found inside the home. Not just outside, inside. And here is what makes that detail extraordinary. The pattern of those droplets, the shape, the angle, the distribution, matches the droplets documented on the exterior porch in the Nest footage. Forensic bloodstain pattern analysis is not guesswork. It is physics. When blood falls in a straight vertical line, with no smearing, no drag marks, no signs of impact splatter, that tells a specific story. It tells investigators that whoever was bleeding was moving with purpose, moving in a controlled manner. There was no struggle at the threshold. There was no fight at the front door. The evidence suggests that whatever happened inside that house, whatever caused Nancy Guthrie to bleed, happened before she ever reached the exit. Think about what that means. The narrative of a violent, forced entry, a sudden attack at the door, that picture is no longer supported by the physical evidence. What the blood tells us instead is a far more unsettling story. Someone moved through that house. Someone controlled that movement. And Nancy Guthrie was bleeding before she ever left. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, one of the most respected voices in American forensic medicine, reviewed the blood evidence and made a statement that has not received nearly enough attention. He said, and I am quoting directly, that the droplet pattern is consistent with blood falling from the nose or mouth mixed with air. His words, "She was coughing up blood or dripping from the nose." That is not the signature of a sharp blow, a single violent strike, a quick incapacitation. That is the signature of internal trauma, of something that was already happening to her body in the minutes or hours before that door opened. This type of blood, often aerated, suggests a more systemic issue than a simple cut or external wound. It implies a deeper injury, potentially to the respiratory system or upper digestive tract, which would cause blood to mix with air before exiting the body. This detail is critical because it pushes the timeline of the injury earlier than the moment she was taken from the house. It means the initial trauma occurred inside the home, and likely not as a result of a struggle at the door itself. When did the bleeding start? That is the question the blood evidence now forces us to ask. Because if the blood inside the home matches the blood outside the home, and if both patterns indicate controlled movement rather than violent struggle, then the timeline the public has been given may be incomplete, and that matters enormously for where this investigation goes next. The FBI has now confirmed something that reframes the entire case. According to a source close to the investigation, speaking to CBS News, the suspect had been inside Nancy Guthrie's home before the night of February 1st. This is not a random crime. This was a targeted, premeditated act. Someone who knew the layout, the routines, the cameras, and how long it would take for anyone to notice she was gone. The figure captured on the Nest camera moves with familiarity. There is no hesitation at the entrance, no scanning of the environment like someone approaching an unknown space. The route, the timing, the exit, all of it suggests advanced knowledge. When investigators look at that footage now, they are not looking at a stranger. They are looking at someone who had already done the reconnaissance. This prior presence implies a level of planning and familiarity that elevates the crime from a spontaneous act to a calculated operation. It suggests the perpetrator was not just looking for an opportunity, but was executing a predetermined plan, leveraging intimate knowledge of the victim's residence and habits. This is a bombshell detail that completely shifts the investigative paradigm, which brings us to the DNA and to the complication that is currently standing between this investigation and an arrest. The laboratory processing the biological evidence recovered from inside the home is in Florida, and that laboratory has, in the words of Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, encountered challenges. He used that word carefully, challenges. What he means, what the forensic science actually describes, is that the DNA sample recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home is a mixed sample. Multiple contributors, multiple genetic profiles layered on top of each other inside a single biological specimen. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what DNA mixture analysis actually requires. When forensic scientists collect a biological sample at a crime scene, they are hoping for a single source profile. One person's DNA, clean and unambiguous, ready to be run against the National CODIS database or uploaded for investigative genetic genealogy. Mixed samples are a different problem entirely. The technical term for separating a mixed DNA sample is deconvolution, and depending on the ratio of contributors, it can range from difficult to functionally impossible. The process of deconvolution involves complex algorithms and statistical analysis to try and tease apart the individual genetic profiles within a single sample. It's like trying to separate two different songs that have been recorded on the same track, where one song might be much louder than the other, or they might be playing at similar volumes. Forensic genetic genealogy expert Colleen Fitzpatrick explained the core issue in precise terms. She said, suppose you have a mixture, and it is 90% Nancy's and 10% somebody else's. That 10% may not be enough for the laboratory to build a usable profile. Now reverse that ratio, make it 50-50. The extraction becomes even harder because the computer systems designed to isolate individual profiles struggle to distinguish where one person's genetic signature ends and another's begins. The challenge is amplified when the quantity of DNA is low or if the DNA is degraded. CeCe Moore, the lead forensic genealogist at Parabon Nanolabs, expressed cautious optimism. Her exact words, "We have had success with a lot of cases with mixtures, but it does take a little more time." This optimism is tempered by the inherent difficulties as each mixed sample presents its own unique puzzle. Barbara Rae-Venter, the scientist who identified the Golden State Killer, further explained that the situation suggests Nancy's DNA likely dominates the sample, making the extraction of the suspect's profile significantly harder. If the victim's DNA is present in a much higher concentration, it can effectively drown out the smaller, less abundant DNA of the perpetrator, making it incredibly difficult for the deconvolution software to isolate a clean, usable profile for comparison or genealogical analysis. This means the lab isn't just looking for DNA, they're looking for a needle in a haystack, where the haystack is mostly made of the victim's own genetic material. The FBI has also confirmed that DNA collected from the gloves found approximately 2 miles from the Guthrie residence was submitted to CODIS, the national database that stores genetic profiles of convicted offenders and arrested individuals. There was no match. The suspect's DNA is not in CODIS. That means this is someone with no prior felony conviction. No previous arrest that resulted in a DNA sample being catalogued. This is someone who, until the night of February 1st, had managed to stay entirely below the radar of the American criminal justice system. When CODIS returns empty, investigators have one remaining path forward: investigative genetic genealogy, IGG, the technique that identified Bryan Kohberger in the Idaho student murders. The technique that unmasked Joseph James DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer after more than 4 decades. The technique that connected Rex Heuermann to the Gilgo Beach murders. In each of those cases, investigators uploaded a DNA profile to a genealogy database, not to find the suspect directly, but to find the suspect's relatives, distant cousins, second cousins. People who share enough genetic markers, to allow forensic genealogists to build a family tree and trace a line back to one specific individual. The process involves comparing the unknown DNA profile to millions of publicly available genetic profiles submitted by individuals to commercial genealogy services. By identifying shared segments of DNA, genealogists can construct family trees, working backward through generations to identify common ancestors and then forward to pinpoint potential suspects. But there is a limitation that the public needs to understand. The databases available to law enforcement for IgG are not the same databases that you or I might use to trace our ancestry. Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, the two largest consumer genealogy platforms in the United States, together holding profiles for more than 50 million people, are legally inaccessible to law enforcement without individual user consent. Investigators are restricted to GED match and family tree DNA, which together hold fewer than 2 million profiles. Barbara Rae-Venter, the scientist who identified the Golden State Killer, put the limitation in stark terms. If we could use Ancestry or 23andMe, you are talking about 10 to 20 times as many people. The suspect's chances of having a relative in those smaller databases are significantly lower. And if the suspect's family ancestry is recent, if they or their parents immigrated from outside the United States, the chances drop even further. That was precisely the obstacle in the Brian Kohberger case. Kohberger's family had relatively recent Italian ancestry, which meant fewer relatives in American genealogy databases, which meant the identification took longer than cases involving families with deep generational roots in the United States. Investigators still got there, but it took time. The ancestral profile of the suspect matters enormously for the timeline of an IgG identification. If the suspect has deep American roots with many relatives who have submitted their DNA to public databases, an identification can happen in days or weeks. If their ancestry is more recent, or from regions less represented in these databases, the process can stretch into months or even years, requiring more extensive genealogical research. While the laboratory works, multiple other investigative tracks are running in parallel. The Range Rover. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, law enforcement converged on a private residence in the Catalina foothills and on a grey Range Rover parked at a nearby Culver's restaurant, less than 5 minutes from that residence. The vehicle was photographed extensively, covered with evidence tarps and removed by tow truck. No arrest was made. No connection to the Guthrie case has been officially confirmed. But the timing and the proximity are not coincidences that investigators are likely to ignore. The meticulous process of photographing every angle, covering the vehicle with evidence tarps, and towing it away for forensic examination indicates a high level of investigative interest. This suggests that the vehicle or its occupants are considered significant to the case, even if a direct link has not yet been publicly established. The Range Rover could potentially be the vehicle seen in the Nest camera footage, or it could be connected to the private residence that was also searched, adding another layer to the complex web of leads, the purchase trail. The surveillance footage captured specific items on the suspect: clothing, a backpack, items that investigators believe may have been purchased commercially before the crime. Sources indicate that law enforcement is actively pursuing what is being described as a purchase trail, attempting to trace specific items of equipment through retail records, loyalty programs, and payment data. If those items were purchased at a major retailer such as Walmart, that transaction left a digital footprint, and that footprint has a timestamp, it has a payment method, it has a location. This digital breadcrumb trail can be invaluable, potentially leading investigators to a specific store, a specific time, and even a specific individual if a credit card or loyalty program was used. Even cash purchases can be narrowed down by location and time, allowing investigators to review surveillance footage from the store itself. This track highlights the modern reality of criminal investigations, where almost every action leaves a digital trace that can be followed. The gloves. Multiple pairs of gloves were recovered in the area surrounding the Guthrie residence in the days following the disappearance. Most, investigators clarified, belonged to search personnel who discarded them during active operations, a common practice to prevent cross-contamination. But at least one pair, found approximately 2 miles from the home, consistent with the gloves visible in the Nest camera footage, has been forensically processed and submitted to both CODIS and the IGG pipeline. No match in CODIS. The genealogy analysis is ongoing. This specific pair of gloves is a critical piece of evidence, as it directly links the suspect's presence in the area to the items seen in the surveillance footage. The DNA found on these gloves, even if not in CODIS, provides a genetic blueprint that IGG can potentially use to identify the perpetrator. The reward structure in this case has escalated in a way that reflects how seriously both the family and law enforcement are taking the urgency of the timeline. The FBI posted a federal reward of $100,000. The Tucson crime hotline added another $100,000. And on February 24th, Savannah Guthrie, news anchor, Today show host and Nancy Guthrie's daughter, posted a video on Instagram announcing a personal family reward of up to $1 million for information leading to her mother's safe return. In the same statement, the family announced a $500,000 donation to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Adults. This was also the first time Savannah Guthrie publicly acknowledged that her mother may be lost. Not in the sense of disoriented, lost in the sense that the family no longer has certainty that she is alive. That is a significant and painful shift in tone, and it tells us something about what the family has been told privately by investigators. The combined reward now stands at an astonishing $1,200,000, a sum that underscores the desperation and the belief that someone out there holds the key to Nancy's whereabouts. This massive financial incentive is a powerful tool designed to compel anyone with information, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, to come forward. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her cell phone at 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, confirming she was no longer in proximity to her phone at that hour. This detail provides a crucial timestamp, a hard stop to her presence near her personal device, and by extension a strong indicator of when she was removed from her home or incapacitated. It narrows the window of the crime, giving investigators a precise moment to focus their efforts on. Now I want to address something that has received almost no critical analysis in mainstream coverage of this case. The communication coming out of the Pima County Sheriff's Office is inconsistent. I am not saying that to be inflammatory. I am saying it because it is factually demonstrable and it matters. Sheriff Chris Nanos gave an interview to NBC News in which he described the DNA complications in terms that were far more specific than anything in his written official releases. He said, verbally, that the laboratory had encountered challenges. He described the DNA as mixed and partial. He suggested that investigators believed they had suspect DNA from inside the home. But when the sheriff's office issued its written statement following that interview, the language was reduced to a single sentence. As with any biological evidence, there can be challenges separating DNA, etc. There are currently no updates regarding this process. Those are not the same statement. The verbal interview created specific public expectations about the state of the forensic evidence. The written release walked those expectations back without explanation. In a case this high profile, a case that has generated 40,000 tips and national media attention, the gap between what a sheriff says in a television interview and what his office puts in writing is not a minor inconsistency. It is a credibility question.
Hi there.
And credibility questions in active investigations
coming
have
on to say
consequences.
it is
They affect
day
public
24
trust. They affect
since
tip
our mom
volume.
was
And
taken
they affect the willingness of
in the
potential
dark of
witnesses
night
to come
from her
forward.
bed.
When the public perceives a lack of transparency
And
or
every
conflicting
hour and
information
minute
from official
and
sources,
second
it can
and
erode
every long
confidence
night
and make
has
people
been
less
agony
likely to cooperate,
since then.
fearing their information might be mishandled or dismissed.
Worrying about her.
There are also questions
Fearing
being raised about the internal structure of decision-making within the investigation itself. Sources familiar with the case have suggested that key investigative decisions may be concentrated among a very small number of command staff within the Pima County Sheriff's Office. A concentration of authority that in complex multi-agency investigations can create bottlenecks and blind spots. The FBI is operating on a parallel track. The Tucson Police Department has been involved. The Pima County Medical Examiner has conducted analysis. But coordination between these agencies and the flow of information from each to the others is not transparent from the outside. And in a case where time is not on anyone's side, coordination failures are not abstract concerns. In missing person cases, especially those involving potential abduction, every hour counts. Any delay in information sharing or decision-making between agencies can have dire consequences, potentially allowing a perpetrator more time to evade capture or dispose of evidence. Sheriff Nanos himself admitted that his department believed they had cracked the case when they detained a suspect in Rio Rico in the early days of the investigation. That man was released hours later without charges. What does it mean when the lead agency announces near certainty and then quietly walks it back? This incident, while perhaps a genuine lead at the time, further contributes to the perception of inconsistency and can undermine public confidence in the investigative process. It highlights the immense pressure on law enforcement in high-profile cases, but also the need for extreme caution in public statements. Despite these challenges, the investigation is not stalled. Multiple tracks remain active. Genetic analysis continues at the Florida lab, with forensic scientists working tirelessly to deconvolute the mixed DNA sample. The purchase trail tracing of gear seen in surveillance footage is ongoing, with investigators meticulously following digital breadcrumbs. Forensic processing of the Range Rover seized on Valentine's Day is underway, with every inch of the vehicle being examined for clues. The IgG analysis of the glove DNA is progressing as genealogists build family trees in hopes of identifying a relative. The FBI Tip-Line Intelligence Review is a massive undertaking, covering over 40,000 tips, each requiring careful assessment and follow-up. And ongoing area searches, including manhole covers, rooftops, and remote terrain around the Catalina foothills, continue as investigators leave no stone unturned in their search for Nancy Guthrie or any evidence related to her disappearance. The blood inside the home matches the blood outside. The suspect knew that house. The DNA is complicated but being worked. No CODIS match. IgG is the last forensic path standing. A reward of $1,200,000 is on the table. And Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother of one of the most recognizable faces in American morning television, has been missing for 25 days. The central questions remain unanswered. Who was in that house before February 1st? What happened in the hours before those blood droplets hit the floor? Who walked through Nancy Guthrie's front door that night? If you are in the Tucson area and you have seen behavior that changed, someone who disappeared for hours, someone who stopped their routine without explanation, someone who was nervous in a way that felt different, the FBI wants to hear from you. The number is 1-800-CALL-FBI. The reward stands at $1,200,000. That number exists because the family believes someone out there has the answer, and they are asking you to give it to them. At Blackline Archive, we follow the evidence, we follow the science, and we follow the people whose stories deserve more than silence. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and drop your analysis in the comments below. What do you think matters more right now? The blood pattern inside the home or the DNA complication at the Florida laboratory? Because this case is not stalled, it is building, and when the next development breaks, we will be here. These are not just stories. These are real people, real lives, and a real family waiting for answers that are still out there somewhere in the dark.